good. Sorry. Did that come through? Probably.
No, I just see
Okay.
no screen
Sorry. Okay. I'm starting it right now. Come on. This is the wrong slide, but there's the slides. Is everybody seeing this?
Yes, we're good. We
Yes?
got you. Yeah, we're in
Oh
business.
my gosh. Okay. Holy moly. Wow, what a morning. Okay. So yes, Jesse, thank you for introing us. Today we're going to be talking about our leadership trends, leadership advantage report findings. This is like an Ask Me Anything style, so jump in at any point in the chat or come off mute and let me know what questions you have. And then it's also going to be participatory toward the end. Well, in the middle, really. Jesse, I had this opener for you, but maybe since we're at 9:10, we can keep going forward.
That sounds good.
Okay.
I'm based
All right.
on our tech issues alone, I'm a red now. But
Yeah.
we'll get there.
Showed up a green, turned into a yellow. I understand. Okay. So I already mentioned some of this, but in this session, it's going to be recorded. You hopefully got requests for permission for that. I'd love for you all to interact in the chat. I already see that you're doing that, so just keep the flow going. And again, this is AMA style. Feel free to pop in with any questions that you have. Hi, I'm Heather. I'm our senior data journalist here at Culture Amp, which means that I get to work with the research team under Freesia Jackson. If you know her, she's a superstar. And I get to translate our research findings into written word and put it out on our blog and on social media and the likes like that. So if you've read any research from us in the last year and a half, probably written by me and some other team members as well. What we're going to cover today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the research, right? Like what the methodology was, what our sample size is looking like. I'll go over a couple of primary findings. And then we're going to have a discussion. I want to hear you all and your takeaways from the research. Will reflect on what you learned, but also what you want to do with this material next. And then there'll be a link to the report and we can dive into some questions then. But again, don't wait for your questions. If you have something pressing you want answered, just go ahead and jump in. This is a slide that's at the end. It's the exact same slide, except there's a cute GIF underneath the look ahead that you'll see. It'll be reviewed. It's not that great, it's just fine. But these are the questions that I'm going to come back to you and ask. So what have these insights raised for you? I want to know what your reflections are. Like if you're internalizing them, externalizing them, mapping onto your organization or onto your community group, I want to hear about it. And then how might you bring them to your community? So like, what are your ideas? Are you going to bring in a couple of leaders to talk and reflect on some of these findings? Like what could you possibly do with some of this information with your groups? Okay, I saw something pop up in the chat. Did I?
You're good. No, you didn't miss anything. We love your work and we need pumpkin spice lattes. You're caught up.
Oh, I put some pumpkin in mine this morning and I'm using my mug with skeletons doing yoga poses on it. So
yeah,
I am with you. Yeah, it's witchy season. Every season is witchy season, but particularly this one. Okay, so Jesse, it's really hard actually for me to see the chat. So if any questions come up that you feel like needs to be answered now, can you let me know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. All right, let's get into it. So how did we do the research? How did we go about understanding the state of leadership in today's workplace? We took a mixed methods approach, which means combining qualitative and quantitative types of data. And we wanted to isolate the experience of senior leaders and the impact that they have on employee engagement, on performance, and also on retention. So we did quite a lot. What did that sample size look like? First of all, we have noticed over the course of several years doing research that when we control for company size, the results change. And so for this study, we specifically looked at enterprise level companies. So those are companies that have 1,000 or more employees at them. And we just looked at leadership and the employee experience under those leaders in that size of organization, because the results were different when we looked at smaller companies. Anyway, so the data set, just looking at companies over 1,000 employees, we heard from 1.7 million employees. And within that 1.7, we spliced that data by leadership level. And we had 22,000 plus in our sample that equate to senior leadership. So that's VP and above. So that gives you a sense of what definitions we're using here. And also the sample size is really big. Often in studies about leadership, we get a couple hundred leaders. And so this was really exciting work for our team. As far as what we found, this slide is sort of all encapsulating. It's also on the events page that you registered with that Jesse had put together. So you can refresh or look at those to refresh from here, but essentially these are our top 5 findings that you would also find in the report. 1, there is a leadership sentiment gap. We're going to go into that right away. And it's affecting organizational alignment. Employee perception of leaders shapes organizational outcomes. Leadership performance is a multiplier. Leadership transitions significantly impact organizational stability. And leadership effectiveness drives engagement and behaviors associated with high performance. So what is really the big takeaway from all of these? Leaders have a lot that they're responsible for, right? Like every piece of the employee experience is sort of guided and shepherded by leaders, which we all know, of course, it's sort of the definition of leadership, but it really is all encompassing, and it's humbling to see all of it in one place. Let's dive into that first leadership disconnect, because there's 2 pieces of data here that we're considering when we built out this finding. The first one has to do with, and you may have seen this because we've published this in benchmarks, we published this in our leadership report, but essentially during COVID, perceptions of leaders actually went up pretty drastically. We see this big jump. Hopefully you're seeing are you seeing my mouse if I am gesturing? Yes.
Yep, we got you.
Okay, perfect. So from 2019, which was really steady in leadership perception from 2017 to 2019, then we see this big uptake, and that's across all of the items that relate to leadership, right? Confidence in the leaders, leaders demonstrating that people are important, leaders sharing a motivating vision, and also keeping employees informed about what's happening at the organization. Across all of these, we see a big uptrend. And then a couple of them, one actually just continues to go up, but the rest start to fall from there. There are lots of potential reasons or ways that we could explain this jump. It could be that leaders felt really accessible because suddenly employees and employers were all facing the same set of uncertainties and seemed to have the same amount of information about it. So the divide that is typically felt between employees and employers maybe got a little bit close together. That gap got a little bit smaller, and so maybe employees were more like seeing leaders as human. I don't know. It also could be that leaders just stepped up during that time. We don't have the why. We can only take a guess here and interpret. But what's also interesting is after 2021, we see the downslope. And this data, if you'll notice, goes to July 2024. I just didn't have enough time to update the visual for this, but I'll tell you that all of the items have continued to trend down. So we see further declines happening here in 2025. So we're still on the way down. Some of these are dipping further down than we've ever seen them. And so this is pretty heartening, and it starts to potentially explain the disconnects that we're seeing. And also, we always want to know why. Some of these reasons, right, I've already talked about a couple, but why are we seeing the downtrend? First, we've had huge economic shifts, some of that brought on by the pandemic. AI-driven disruption. Yeah, I mean, I can't even get outside my front door without somebody pinging me about AI disruption or some new AI tool or like AI on my phone telling me to do, whatever. It's everywhere. The lingering social effects of the pandemic are still there. I think there are even broader social fallouts happening right now. If you're in the US in particular, this is probably ringing true for you. But there are rising global tensions also, right? We're seeing wars that are impacting all kinds of things. And then also, confidence in leadership is the #1 driver of engagement. So driver analysis is conducting using correlation. And so if you're familiar with stats at all, this is recognizable probably, but when you have a correlation, when one goes up, the other goes up. When one goes down, the other goes down. At least when it's that type of relationship that we're identifying. And so with confidence in leadership being the number one driver of engagement, and we've seen engagement go down, it makes sense that we're also seeing leadership go down. Leaders also have a vastly different work experience than individual contributors. That's where we're going to talk about next. And also, this is the human part, like leaders are spread really, really thin right now. We are asking them to navigate an increasingly complex workplace and in a highly unstable market. And so I think that there's a tendency in talks where we're talking about leaders to like almost dehumanize them a little bit. And I really don't want to do that. I want to bring full humanity into this and say like leaders are up against a lot right now. And so we're seeing the perception slip down, but we're also at the same time seeing the expectation of leaders come up. And so when we dance around these topics, I just want to be sure that we're speaking to leaders and giving them the benefit of the doubt. Okay, but about that third bullet point, leaders are having an elevated experience at the top. When we look at an average of all survey items that all companies who use Culture Amp, this is a composite. I think it's 107 items, and we average them by leadership level. We see a pretty clear pattern, which is what you're seeing here on the screen. Individual contributors, right, they average around 62% favorability. That's across all 107 items. That covers things like development, career growth, leadership scores, confidence in where the company is going, everything. This is a composite. It's about 62% favorability. And then if you look at the other side, right, we look at the C-suite, it's 78%. And not only is there a big difference between those two levels, but we see as you ascend the leadership hierarchy, your experience improves, which raises a pretty big question from my end, which is, are leaders answering based on their sort of unique and more informed lens? Like they actually have more information about some things that are happening in the organization because of their place in the leadership ladder? Or do they feel more favorably because they are sort of like out of touch with what's happening with the realities of the workplace? And so that takes us to that bigger question, like, is this just an elevated experience because they have more information, or is there a more fundamental disconnect? And we looked into our data to try and answer that question. We found a couple of things that point us toward the disconnect piece. So one example is that when it comes to taking action, they're often in the room. Leaders are in the room when survey results are discussed, right? And also when decisions are made, and they're often making the decisions. They also know that their direct reports are having conversations with their team about action taking, or at least they've been advised to do so. But the issue is that those actions may not be effectively trickling down to lower levels. And we found, to the question, I have seen positive action taking place, a 40% difference between C-suite and individual contributors. And so we're sort of thinking that maybe there's a communication gap happening that's leading to a disconnect. A second piece of data that we looked at is it was actually the largest difference between individual contributors and the C-suite, and it related to the company heading in the right direction. So this is confidence that the company is going to succeed in the next 3 years. It makes sense that there would be a disconnect here, again, because senior leaders have more information about strategy, but also kind of need to be optimistic about where the company strategy is headed in order to sell it and instill confidence in lower levels of leadership. However, there are questions around directing resources and daily decisions that show that the experience on the ground may not be aligning with the vision. And so it turns out, too, that alignment is really important, which is what we'll chat about next.
Okay, wait, so pausing there, basically what you're saying is that there's a different experience. I'm digesting this in real time, but my random stream of consciousness in my own words is that senior leaders are having a different experience, not just because of like they are the ones making the decisions, but there's like a communication gap in terms of like what their employee actually experience is.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're thinking, right? There are a lot of ways to explain this. And so what we do is we have a hypothesis about what explains it, and then we test it by looking at smaller slices of data. but yeah, that's right on, Jesse. So the takeaway, right, the heart of all of these findings, the ones that I'll have covered so far and the ones that I'll keep covering, is that great leadership is really the key to scaling impact. But we had a question about like, what is a great leader and what impact do they actually have? And so that's in the research where we went next. And I love the findings that we have for this piece, because this is where things get really interesting. We identified employees' responses on the manager and leadership factors. So if you think the chart that I showed right in the beginning that had the, my sister's calling me. Okay, that had the, sorry, it's on my phone. I'm dialing on my phone. Otherwise, it wouldn't have. It didn't cut out my audio, did it?
No, we're good. You're good.
Okay. Oh, all the issues today. That's so fun. Okay. So we categorize leaders based on those. So all of the 4 questions, the having confidence in leaders, leaders having informing about what's happening, leaders communicating a vision, and letting people know they're important to company success. Those 4 items are what create the leadership factor. And we took the leadership factor and then a similar management factor. And we categorize leaders as either great or poor and managers as either great or poor. We did that using the 25 percentile. So 25 on the bottom, 25 at the top. And we assessed, based on those dimensions for both. What we found is that under a great leader and a great manager, 95% of employees are engaged, which is phenomenal. So if you're like, how do I get my employees engaged? Have really great leaders and really great managers. Harder than it sounds, much harder than it sounds. But we also looked at what happens when we have one of each, okay? So if the group of employees, Nicole, I'll get to your question in just a second. So if the group of employees who have a poor direct manager, but have great leadership, 80% are still engaged, okay? Which is a big amount. Like 80% engagement is pretty good, especially in today's world. However, when we flip that, when we go, what happens when you have a poor leader but a great manager? Only 33% of employees are engaged. So what this shows us is the power of leadership in influencing engagement. If you've heard the adage, people don't leave companies, they leave bad managers, we found it's actually leadership. So maybe it is actually the company that the leaders are leading. And I have the grid with all 4 dimensions I'll show after, but Nicole, did you want to jump in and ask your question or your comment?
Yeah, and sorry, I'm not on video, I'm on my phone. So this, I'm actually glad you kept going because this slide gives me even more evidence. One of the things that I've been seeing in my work is that you can have a great manager, but your manager can't outperform the limitations of your systems and your processes. And so your manager's hands are sort of tied, and it actually makes employees more resentful because they see this manager who they're attached to and they like being hamstrung by the organization's systems and processes. And it's actually creating higher levels of disengagement. So it's kind of fascinating that you all are seeing the same thing in your data.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think you're right. When we think experientially about what's going on for employees in each of these scenarios, that's probably one of the hardest to have, is that your manager is super stellar, but like they're stuck because they can't get the green light from upper levels of management and their leadership to do anything. And so like everybody's stuck. And yeah, I can understand how resentment and frustration and disengagement would just be breeding in that environment. When we look at all 4 dimensions, so we have great leader, great manager, great leader, poor manager, right? You also see down there, the one I didn't show smiley faces, is when you have a poor leader and a poor manager. We only see 20% engagement when that's the case. And so it tells us, first and foremost, leaders really do set the tone. But also we can see that when our leadership and our management are not performing well, that engagement really goes downhill. It shows us the power of engagement overall, on top of knowing how much leaders really influence and set the tone of our organizations. And of course, it doesn't just stop in engagement, right? It also impacts performance. So we did look at performance, and we found that 18% of employees who are under high-performing leaders, so that's leaders who have received a high performance rating. So there's not perception of leaders. This is their performance rating. were high performing themselves, which is a 9% point jump from their peers who were just exceeding expectations. So their leadership peers, right, who were exceeding expectations. So when leaders perform at a high level, they're not just modeling excellence, they're actually elevating the people around them, which at Culture Amp we've been calling the multiplier effect, which we really like. Power to leaders. Leaders have a lot of power. So here's a little question for you. You may have already seen this stat, so it's a popular one because we love it. It's very impactful, but let me know what you think. Employees under high-performing leaders are 4.5 times more likely to be high performers themselves. Is that true or false? And you can use the chat. I see it pop up, but I'm nervous to click on it. Hopefully it doesn't mess it. Okay, true. I'm seeing lots of truths. Lots of truths. Everybody has seen this one, right? Yes. Good, true. Yeah, I like that. Lots of E's. Good. Yeah, okay. So you all are correct. This is true. Whoops. Okay. And then just a few extra stats. This is from Josh Bearson's research. Just in case you are going to take this to your community group and you want some data that's not Culture Amp data, we have this slide for you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just so that you know, this is validated by other groups who are doing similar types of research. And yeah, Bearson is fantastic. So that's great. Okay, so then the next thing we looked at. Oh,
can we pause, Heather, real quick about, I think this is like, I want to like highlight what you just said, which is that often that expression of like, people don't leave managers, they leave companies. And I want to just like double down on the fact that like, I love that Culture Amp research kind of like myth busts some of these like commonly used expressions, in that what we're seeing is like actually they leave your manager's manager, like whoever the people are that are like one step away from you, that is dictating your employee experience more than just your immediate manager. So really wanting to highlight that once again, because that kind of blew my mind the first time that I saw this report last year, that I was like, wait, what? That's bonkers. So anyway, I need to double down on that, on that point.
Yeah, and you're right, Jesse, we do love myth busting. We just put out another article last week that myth busts that quiet quitting is widespread. And so check out our blog if you want all the myth busting. We have a propensity for going after those types of questions. Like, what are the norms that people just tend to accept without really questioning? And we have so much data.
And then Heather, even thinking about like a few years ago, we knew that like development was one of the #1 key driver to engagement back like whatever that was, 2022 or whatnot. So is it fair to say that now the #1 driver is actually confidence and leadership, not just development opportunities? Like the confidence and leadership has outweighed that, is what we're seeing with this research and where we are today, or no?
That's a really good question. So confidence in leaders is the #1 right now, and it had been the career development before.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that we're talking like a 0.01% difference when it comes to that correlation strength. Okay. And so it's ranked as #1, but though the development is still in the top 3. And confidence in leaders was in the top 3 before as well. And so they're really close together. What the takeaway I would have is less about that coming up and more just that as the environment and the market has changed, the aspects of the employee experience that drive engagement have remained stable.
Got it.
That's probably the takeaway.
Okay. No, that's cool. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but super important. Yeah, confidence in leadership is pretty wild, and how much it influences the employee experience, in my opinion. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Are we good? Any other?
Yes, I'm sorry for derailing.
Okay.
Yes, we're good.
No, not derailing. My dog, hang on. Murphy, hey, can you stop, please? I have a puppy, and she just got spayed, and she has a collar on and she's just like going for it. I know she's very cute, but she just needs to calm down. Okay, so the next, if she comes over to me, I will pull her up. She's 35 pounds, so yeah, okay, for a puppy on the bigger side. So what we did next was we wanted to test this idea again that leadership have an outsized impact on the organization, and relate that to managers to see like what actually changes. And so we looked at what happens when a leader leaves an organization and compared that to when a manager leaves. And so, I mean, first of all, to no one's surprise, we did find that leadership transitions are disruptive to organizations. And the first thing we did, this graph is a little unintuitive, so I'm going to take a moment to explain it. But so what we have are here in the green, let's just start with that. That's when we have a leadership turnover. That is the percentage of difference in turnover that we see following that leader's exit at the time frame that's at the bottom here. So after 3 months after a leader leaves, compared to teams that did not see a leadership change, there's 70% higher turnover. Okay, and just similar to that, we see that at the 6-month mark, compared to teams who didn't have a leadership change, 40% higher turnover, and then at 12 months, 33. So there's a couple of things I want to point out with that chart, and it's the same thing for the managers. We're always comparing what if scores prior to the leader leaving were positive versus negative. This is just looking at attrition, and so we didn't do that extra layer of analysis, Nicole, to see if there were higher attritions if the leader was like fell into that poor leader category or the manager did. That's a really good question. We're looking at like relative, I love data nerds, me too. We're looking at, for culture amp standards, pretty low, what is it, a sample size for this type of analysis. I would say from an academic standpoint, our sample sizes are still really big, but for culture amp standards, I'm going to put my dog out for just a second. Is that fine? Is everybody fine with that? Can I just like take a second?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from this is that when this is just looking at someone and a manager leaving, not whether they have positive or high engagement scores. So if someone left, oh man, this is kind of hard to look at with the different months, Heather, actually. I'm even trying to like take this in myself. I'm even thinking about like, you know, we have a senior leader in the EMEA region who just left, and he's like worked at Culture Amp for like so many years, and like he's just like a beacon for that specific office. And I'm like, oh gosh, what's gonna happen now? You know?
Oh, well, so okay, so I mean, this is kind of forecasting that, and what I love about the comparison here is that the chart is more complicated than what we typically put out, but it's very informative because what we see is that over time, after a leadership change, the attrition slows down compared to teams without the leadership change. But with the manager, it's the opposite. There's not a lot of attrition right away, but then it starts to increase as the time goes on, right? So it could be that it takes time for an employee to decide if the new manager is like a good fit for them compared to the one that was before. Like, I'm not exactly sure what explains this difference, but I love to see a line come down and a line go up in that convergence. But the overall takeaway is that leaders have an outsized impact on employee attrition compared to managers, right? Like that percentage is much higher. And then we already talked briefly about this multiplier effect with leadership performance, but I want to ask another question around it. So pop quiz time. Based on what we've learned and I've talked about so far, which of these do you think are common behaviors among leaders of highly engaged teams? Do they give 18% more continuous feedback? Do they create and align 20% more goals? Do they hold 12% more one-on-ones? Complete 14% more skill coaching activities? Add 22% more actions following survey results? or F, all of the above? Wouldn't it be so funny if I was like, E, because it's actually 23%. I've always wanted to have one of those, but no. You're all correct. The answer, like any good test taking question like this, and you did a good job as test takers, the answer is F, all of the above. Okay. So we're at the end of the findings, and we're at 40 minutes, which is perfect, because now we're going to have discussion and Q&A. Yes. These are the overall takeaways. I'm going to leave them up for a moment, take a look at them. I'm just going to read the parts that are in bold for re-emphasis. First, great leadership is the key to scaling impact. What today's leaders need to know, and then there are some specifics about that, about the disconnect widening. There's a note in there about leadership profiles. I didn't cover that today because it's a very complex piece of research, and if you want to look into it, please go into the leadership report. We use latent profile analysis, which is a machine learning process that identifies patterns in perception of leaders. It's very interesting. I encourage you to go look at the report. So that's in there. And then, of course, the ripple effects of leadership and leadership transition is real. My takeaway, rather than blaming the managers, leaders need to take a look in the mirror. Yes, of course. We love when leaders take a look in the mirror, for sure. And when also, one mirror is survey results. I think that leaders can often turn away or not ask questions in surveys that they don't want to see, but it's actually a really powerful tool, a really powerful mirror for leaders. Okay, so now, of course, we're going to move over to the discussion side. I've presented you some data. Hopefully you have some other data too you could bring into this. And here's the gift that I promised you. It's so cute and funny. I need some tips and tricks from you. Okay, so I'd like to know, what have these insights raised for you, and how might you bring them to your community? You can come off of mute or drop it in the chat. Let's talk. You can start with either of these questions.
As folks are typing in the chat or coming off mute, also is this correct to say, Heather, that leaders not only dictate engagement, but are also have a higher impact on employee attrition and churn than just regular, your one level manager? Okay.
Yeah. We have pretty compelling numbers in the leadership report about that too.
Mm-hmm.
Even without a change. Yeah. This backs up a ton of things I've been talking about on TikTok, yes, where I have a much more frontline audience. I'm definitely going to use this. Oh, cool. I love that idea. Also, I should follow you on TikTok.
Safe for work or not safe for work, Nicole? I was even thinking my assumption going through some of this is that the state of the world is just heavy and shitty in general, I think. And that even for senior leaders, it seems like unless you're incredibly profit and money motivated, being a senior leader sucks right now. That would be my assumption about the state of the world right now, and what we're seeing with all of this is unless you're heavily capitalistic, and that's your main motivator and driver, which it is for a lot of people, then you're probably cool, everything's gravy. But if that's not your motivation, then you're probably ugh, this is heavy and sucks and it's way harder. Anyway, that's my assumption about how I'm taking some of this in.
Jesse, I'm happy to jump in with some initial thoughts. So hi, Heather. My focus is on trust, and I actually literally just wrote a post this week on just how many employees don't want to ever become a manager, because they know how much, as much as they might complain about managers or leaders, they also know they have this incredibly heavy workload. And have to deal with all the complaints, right? So I think it's, especially coming from an IO psych lens, right? When we think about high performance work systems, it's so rarely like, an individual thing, right? It is very much how do the systems support. So, I think that too often I use my, all of us, right, can go right to like training. Oh, we need to train managers more. We need to train leaders more. And that's such a small piece of it. Still do that, everyone. But that's such a small piece because if the systems don't reinforce the support for that. So I'll give you an example. We had a disproportionate distribution of PIPs at a previous organization. I'll put it that way. And, managers were exhausted and they, kind of like didn't have the patience to really do what they should be doing as a manager, right? With coaching. And a lot of the theme for the particular group that was, getting PIPs at a higher rate than others was around communication and just not taking the time to kind of understand. And what we did was we completely revamped the process. And interestingly enough, we gave it more steps, made it harder to put someone on a PIP, but managers' workload actually went down because with each kind of request for PIP, it triggered coaching around how to handle things. And then they started to just develop the habits. And on top of that, the systems, there would be like job aids that would pop up. So if you like put into the system that request, like, little like learnings, like kind of mini learnings would like pop up for you. Like, have you checked this? Have you thought about this? So it's interesting how I know we all get really worried that if we kind of add any steps to something, everyone's going to freak out and it's automatically going to mean so much more work. But it really is about that communication and how you're kind of thinking about things holistically to make things better. So it's more at the manager level, but I'll stop there because Jesse knows I could go down a very large rabbit hole with this. So.
I was like heavy snaps on like, yeah, you can do
Thank
all
you.
the training you want on like these awesome leaders, but like if the systems and infrastructure are messed up, then like nothing's actually ever going to change. And then you have some people who are following the systems and the rules by the book because that's just how their brain works. And then you have other leaders who are just like, no, we're not doing that. Just take the extra day off. Don't put it in the platform. Whatever. It's whatever the thing is, but it's like, oh my God.
Or they follow it by the book, but because they aren't kind of thinking contextually, right? They aren't kind of thinking about discernment between kind of the how, like, and why we have these rules, right? And that all comes down to leadership, role modeling, communication, consistency.
Totally. I love
Yeah.
that.
I'm not a huge fan of PIPs, mostly because there's a lot of evidence that they're not very effective as a tool
Same.
for creating actual change.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
I know that a lot of, yeah, I mean, it is a process. And I think in bigger companies in particular, processes become extra important because we want to efficiently move through repeated patterns. So I understand why PIPs exist. I'm glad to hear that organization was moving away from them and trying to figure out how to reduce the impact on managers. We also know that managers, especially middle managers, are like in a real big squeeze. They're being pulled in 1,000 directions, and also a lot of companies are flattening their hierarchies right now, and so there's extra pressure on them too. So anytime I hear about someone trying to reduce the workload for managers, I'm happy about it. I want to answer. So Paula, you had a question in the chat. Do we have any data on whether senior leaders are satisfied with their compensation? Yes. It follows the exact same trend that we saw with the composite. So individual contributors are the least satisfied, and it kind of goes up in satisfaction. But funny enough, all the way up to the C-suite, no one's happy with their compensation. It's like one of our lowest favorability questions across all of our survey items. Year after year, doesn't seem to budge. Everybody wants more money, even CEOs. Interestingly, though, we can add on top of that because we did an analysis of what employees are talking about in their exit surveys. And I was very surprised to see that often members of the C-suite leave because of compensation. I was just floored by that. I've never been in the C-suite. I don't know what exactly people in the C-suite make, but I always imagine it's like top dollar. And so we have pretty good evidence that even those in the C-suite are feeling unsatisfied with compensation. But I think it's kind of a human impulse also to strive for more. So it could be a part of that. Hopefully that satisfied that question. Let's see. And then Hank says the data is helpful as I speak with CPOs and CFOs about leadership investment. It also highlights, as Jesse says, about businesses who are focused on the wrong aspects. Yeah, for long-term success, definitely. Good observation. Nicole, more focused on teaching on LinkedIn and Substack. Fun. Yeah. Oh, you know what? You all want a little sneak peek about what's coming in November next month?
Yeah.
Because I actually, yeah. So as I was going through this today, I didn't have the lens when I put this together or when we wrote the report that I have now, which is coming into the context of our predictions we'll be making at the beginning of November for 2026. And the overall context is that when it comes to power in the employer-employee relationship, the pendulum has really far swung over to employers this year. We thought that in 2025, there would be like a standoff. And it's just not really happening because it's just the pendulum has swung. And I'm wondering actually if some of the perception of leadership going down has to do with employees sensing that they have less power in the relationship over time. And that's like a clue that we've been heading in, or that we have been for a while heading in the direction that we're headed. So I think it's kind of exciting. But Nicole, I thought of that because of your comment about TikTok being your frontline place where you say, you're not crazy, this is really messed up. Yeah, it's hard right now.
Heather, before we come off the predictions stuff, I know we talked a little bit a while ago about potentially talking to this group of people about some of the things that you're working on. So anyway, just bringing that up in case you want to go there with this conversation at all in the next however many 9 minutes, but.
We could. Are there any other questions I haven't gotten to? And then
there was one more about many of our community members like work for organizations that are not enterprise. Obviously, this research was focused on that and how and why this could be different for many of our community members in that space.
Yeah. The person who wrote this question, can you actually specify, are you interested in what the data is or what the trends are, or anything more specific?
Jess, Lou, if you're on and available to come off mute, this was the one that you asked earlier, but you might not be there. Let's just go with just like trends. Okay. It might be hard to answer with like hard data right now, but how would you respond to that?
Why don't I'm going to plan, let me say this first. I'll put together a couple of stats that compare to the leadership report. So I'll look at the leadership data in the small organizations. But some of the things that we see in smaller organizations, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm really relying on my memory here, learning and development tends to be better in bigger organizations. Oh, you know what, you guys? We just published an article about this, actually, or maybe it's going out tomorrow. But we have more specific findings. It's also focused on large enterprise companies, but it gives the data for all of them in comparison. And so instead of trying to do it from memory and potentially getting something wrong, why don't I'll promise you I'm going to send you that article and a couple of stats about the smaller organizations. Does that sound good? Okay, great. I'm going to stop sharing because I'm pretty sure, and we'll send you these slides. There's the link to the report, and then we've already got the questions. But let me stop sharing. I'm pinned. Oh, there we go. I can see everybody. Perfect. So with our last 7 minutes, do you all want to react to an early prediction, knowing that it's not exactly how it's going to be written? And maybe you all can let me know if you are interested in maybe being quoted in some social media or an article or something like that? Yeah? Okay. All right. I'm not going to share my screen because I'm very certain I did not have permission to do that, but I can read them off to you. Let me pull that part up. Okay. So there are 5, and then there's like an AI conglomeration because there are so many AI predictions that we have because, like I said, can't walk out my front door without hearing something about AI. The first one is actually my favorite because it's kind of funny sounding. You all know EVP, right? Employee Value Proposition.
Yes.
So our first prediction is the result of job hugging, right? Job hugging is this new term out in the media about how employees are holding on to their jobs because they're seeing maybe that the grass isn't greener on the other side, but there's really big economic trend data that supports this idea that job hugging is becoming more common because fewer employees, a much smaller percentage of employees are able to get a higher salary when they jump roles. There have been less jobs available, less people switching jobs. And so there's this idea that there's job hugging. The prediction that's coming out of that is that job hugging and things that are similar is going to create a talent jam. And because of that talent jam, companies are going to try and get employees to leave. So whether that's doing more PIPs, Alex, like maybe that's something that happens, right? We're trying to manage people out. But what we're really going to see is the use of what's called repulsion marketing. If anyone knows marketing, it's like you do something that will repulse the wrong audience or show something that will repulse the wrong audience so that the right audience can identify with it and come in. And so we're saying that HR teams will move from the EVP to the LEVP to focus on the good and the ugly, so that only the employees who are truly committed to stay will stay, and those who are repulsed by that LEVP and that extra layer of transparency might leave. Things like stricter RTO, that's exactly right, Nicole. So we've seen the letter from AT&T, which said, like, if you don't want to come into the office 5 days a week, you can leave. That was from the CEO. And then we also saw, like, the Washington Post put out a memo saying we're reinventing ourselves, and if you don't like our reinvention, you can leave. That one's a more clear example of the repulsion marketing because of the way that that media outlet is trending, at least from a journalistic perspective. I don't know what kind of background, or if you guys all know what's happening there. I'll let you look it up. I don't want to get political, but that's another example of that happening. So what's your reaction? EVPs are the truth. Hallelujah. Okay, like that. Good. Any reactions to that? Spicy.
Wouldn't it be nice for organizations to be clear about their bullshit? That's my reaction is like, wouldn't that be nice for them to just like own up, like, hey, if you want to make money and you're like money hungry and profit motivated, this is your place for you. I would be like, great. If that's what you value, let's talk about it and like attract those people. That could be cool. That'd be cool. But I doubt.
I really think those.
I wonder if organizations have the chutzpah to do it, though. You know?
Yeah. Oh, Paula, that's a good
Just
point
see,
too. EU pay transparency is
I
coming.
think some of them already are. Like,
You think so?
yeah, in the past, I don't know, year and a half or so, as we've really come out of the pandemic, as I'm specifically speaking out of the US, how companies have trended in this new administration of like, they're just being a little bit more out there of like, yeah, we are, you know, I don't know. It just seems like they are being more vocal, at least especially in Seattle, where like it's Microsoft's leaders, some of them, Meta, Amazon, like they're not being shy about some of this stuff. I mean, if you've read the quotes of Andy Jassy, like, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, yeah. Oh my God, Cassie, but if you want to see your family ever, don't work here.
It's really funny. You know what else it reminds me of? I mean, I think in like the last 10 years, what we saw was a sneaky way to say what's not great at your organization, but like make it seem like it's a positive. Like, we're looking for people who are really scrappy. When I see that, I'm like, oh, this organization is telling me that they don't have process for anything. And like, you're going to have to wear 1,000 hats in order to get anything done. And you're probably going to be reinventing the wheel. Like, that's the cue that I get. But it's like they're trying to make it into a positive thing for the people that they think that will attract. Right? But what if instead they're just like, we don't have process for anything. You're going to come in and you're going to have to reinvent the wheel. And we're looking for people who do that. Like, that's a nice shift in my perspective of leading with transparency. Good with ambiguity, yes, is another one, or fast-paced. It is fodder for another roast. Yes. Great. Okay, we don't have any more time. We have 4 others, but I think I just got so much input from you all, and this is what I would love for you to do. Can you all take down, I'll type my email address. If you are interested in maybe possibly providing a quote, we can't get quotes from everybody because we just don't have space, but I would love to get in as many as possible. It's just heather.walker@cultramp.com. But if you are like really gung-ho about giving a quote and finding out what the other predictions are, go ahead and email me, and I'll get back to you, and I'll bring you into the group of people for whom we are running all of these predictions by. But thank you all so much for your candor and your time this morning. I hope it was worthwhile.
This was awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. Nerding out so hard. I'm like, yeah, I almost want to do a whole other session on the predictions once we get close to publishing them, you know? I know that that's planned for, we have that planned for first week of December. So come and hang out with us for that, or we'll do a whole one of these sessions. But thank you all for being here, and we'll send out the recording. We'll send out the slides. We'll ask Heather to send us the article and the stats for the smaller organizations to get that sent out. And we're doing another session at the end of this month on AI and HR that Heather and Frisia just did with our community. And then we're doing an HR prediction session at the beginning of December. So a whole session focused on the upcoming predictions for 2026. All right, I'm stopping the recording now. Ciao, ciao.